Hello and welcome back to On The Shelf. So today is a really anticipated video that I've been meaning to record for a long time. This is my top 10 manga of all time list. Now I want to think of this as kind of a definitive list, but as with everything, things change very regularly, my opinions change, things that would have made my list 5 years ago, 10 years ago would be very different to what's on it now. And I think that this is something that I'd like to kind of revisit maybe next year or the year after and see, what has changed and how my preferences and tastes have evolved. But for now, this is kind of I want to say a very definitive list. I've been collecting and reading manga for more than 10 years, and over those 10 years I've read a lot of series, and not all of them have kind of left their mark on me. And I would say that there are probably series that you might expect to make this list that haven't, and something that might be your all-time top favorite, or maybe even in your top 3, might not even make an appearance in this list, and that might surprise quite a few of you. So yeah, disclaimer, this is my opinion, these are all my favorite manga, but of course, I'm always interested to hear what some of your favorite series are, so let me know down below in the comments, did your series make the list? And if it didn't, I'll be glad to kind of have that discussion with you down below. It might be that I haven't read your favorite series, or it just might not have had that impact on me that it did on you. I do think for sure there are some really heavy hitters in the kind of manga community that would make a lot of your top 10s that I know for a fact I haven't included in this list, and there's some that might surprise you. So yeah, stick to the end of the video, and if you enjoy it, please hit that like button. So without further ado, let's get straight to it. First up, we actually have some honourable mentions, which might surprise you, but at the same time, it doesn't really surprise me because there's so many series that I love and that I wanted to include on this list that I couldn't for a variety of reasons. So I just want to quickly go through these 5 honourable mentions that are all really worthwhile and really worth reading, but just at the moment didn't quite make the cut. So first is, rather than a particular series, it's an entire mangaka, and that is Junji Ito, so anything by Junji Ito. So my actual personal favourite is Smashed by Junji Ito, but as a lot of you will know, with the exception of a few kind of series, Junji Ito writes a lot of short stories, and for that reason they all kind of blend into one for me. I think that although they are creative and a lot of them are very unique, when I think of Junji Ito, I don't really have a particular series in mind. I think of a lot of different types of stories, and yeah, he is a fantastic creator and I love everything he puts out, but nothing has really left its mark on me just yet, and nothing really stood out enough for me to include it on this list. But if you're interested, I would recommend starting with Smashed. It's fantastic and all the stories in this are really good. Another series that came very close to making my top 10, but I couldn't include it because I haven't finished it yet, so I don't actually know whether it's going to kind of have that ending that really solidifies it as one of my favorite series, but that is of course The Girl from the Other Side. I spoke about this series a lot on the channel, so I don't really want to gush about it too much, but just know it's really dark, it's really kind of cute at the same time, and it's just a fabulous read, and I really love this series. I love the creator, and I look forward to everything that they kind of put out as and when they do. Okay, next was another series that was very close to making the list, and it's my favorite series by Naoki Urasawa, and that is of course Pluto. This is a retelling of or a reimagining even of Astro Boy. It's kind of a crime thriller all about a detective who's investigating a series of murders, but in this case the murders are being committed against machines, so it's a world that's kind of inhabited by androids. It feels very much like Blade Runner if you enjoy that story, and it's just a fabulous read. It's really great, and it has a fantastic kind of cliffhanger ending as well, which I really enjoyed. I love pretty much everything that this creator puts out, but Pluto by far is my favourite. And my final 2 honourable mentions were kind of like a joint sort of loggerheads for which one was going to make number 10 in my top 10 spot, but in the end I decided on a completely different series. But both of these series are truly special to me, and I love both of them so much. The first one is Bakuman by Takeshi Obata and Tsugumi Oba, the creators of Death Note. It's a story about two young boys on their journey to creating manga for the first time. So they try and get a series published in Shonen Jump, and you know, it's full of all those wonderful shonen tropes, you know, chasing your dreams, but this one is very based in reality, and it's just a fabulous look inside the manga industry, how difficult it can be to get a series published, and all the challenges that face these two young individuals. So yeah, really love it, and it comes in a great box set as well, so if you're thinking of picking it up, now's probably the best time. Lastly, for my honourable mentions is Cats of the Louvre by Taiyo Matsumoto. This is probably my favourite Taiyo Matsumoto series. This is a wonderful release from Viz Media. It was my #1 read the year that I created my YouTube channel, and it still stands up now, so if you haven't checked this out, please do. Now, number 10 in my top 10 manga of all time will definitely come as a surprise to some of you, but if you know my kind of personal tastes, then it probably will be quite obvious, and that is Fire Punch. So this is an 8-volume series by Tatsuki Fujimoto, the creator of Chainsaw Man. I haven't read Chainsaw Man yet, so that is probably why, if you're wondering, it isn't in this list at all, but this just to me came at such a time where I was having a little bit of a lull with manga. I was finding that a lot of series I read were very similar, or you know, had similar tropes, and I could kind of predict some of the endings of things, and I was getting a little bit bored. You know, just sometimes that kind of burnout that you get from manga collecting, and this series really shocked me. I did a whole review video on it, so again, if you want to go and check that out, please do. But it's just completely bizarre. It's the weirdest thing I've ever read, and I don't think I'll read anything quite as impactful as Fire Punch ever again. It's super violent, super messed up, and I absolutely loved it. All 8 volumes of it were amazing, and even the ending, for how weird it was, just was perfect to me because it's what I expected. By the time I got to the end of it, I thought, you know, this is going to end in the weirdest way, and it didn't disappoint. So if you haven't read Fire Punch, I really urge you to check it out, but please do so with an open mind. Number 9 in my top 10 spot is a shonen staple that I've loved since it came out, and I eagerly anticipate every single volume as and when it gets released, and that is One Punch Man. One Punch Man started as a webcomic by the creator One, who also creates Mob Psycho 100, and it's sort of like a gag manga. It's a completely new take on the superhero genre, and I'm 100% here for it. The art is actually reimagined, I suppose, in Shonen Jump by Yusuke Murata, and it's some of the best art that Shonen Jump has to offer. Every single volume doesn't disappoint in terms of comedy, character development, and I think that's probably the best thing about One Punch Man, is just the characters all stand out to me. All of them seem important, all of them get a lot of time within the manga, and every one of them could be the protagonist of the story, you know, not just our main hero Saitama. For me, One Punch Man is just the pinnacle of Shonen Jump. It does everything that I want Shonen Jump to do in this modern era, and of course, the protagonist is bald, so why wouldn't I love him? Now, number 8 holds a really special place in my heart, and it's one that, although a lot of you might disagree with because, you know, it's been on hiatus for quite a long time, for me, it just does everything that I want from a shonen series, and it has some of my favourite characters ever. So that is D. Greyman. The reason I love D. Greyman so much was, you know, it was a series that I read way back when I first started collecting manga, so it definitely has some of that nostalgia factor to it as well. But also, it was one that I actually kind of avoided for quite a while because I was a huge Blue Exorcist fan. I remember at the time my friend telling me, you have to read D. Greyman, or at least watch the anime, because it's so much better than Blue Exorcist. I remember being like, no way. I love Blue Exorcist, no way. And then Blue Exorcist, for me, I mean, I'm not trying to knock that series, but it got to a point where I was definitely getting bored of the chapters. It wasn't really going anywhere, so I thought, you know what, we'll try out D. Greyman, and wow, was I amazed. This is a series that is about exorcism, but it's told in a very dark way. It's much more sort of different than Blue Exorcist, I'd say. Blue Exorcist feels a little bit like a high school kind of drama with demons thrown in there, whereas this is a very serious organisation dedicated to ridding the world of what are known as Akuma. If you really like that gothic style of artwork as well, a little bit of a Halloween vibe, then this is definitely for you. So please, if you haven't already, check out D Grey Man, but be aware that it is on hiatus for a while. With number 7, we're really getting into the heavy hitters of this list, and this will definitely surprise you, not for the fact that it's on the list, but the place in which it is on my list might shock some of you, and that is Akira. So I of course own this beautiful anniversary box set from Kodansha. It's the first time that the manga was ever printed right to left in its correct format, you know, within the West, and it's really oversized hardcover. Absolutely love it. The series itself is one that I'd obviously experienced previously in anime form. I really love Akira, the film. It's what introduced me to anime, like a lot of people within the West, so it's just a complete cult classic, but I really wanted to go and check out the source material and see how it compares to the film. It goes above and beyond what I was expecting. There's so much that isn't in the film that's within the manga that just is awe-inspiring. I feel like just as the film sort of feels like it starts to get going, it ends, whereas the manga has so much more character development, and I really urge anyone to go and check it out if you haven't already. It's set, if you don't know, in Neo-Tokyo, which is kind of this dystopian future version of Tokyo that's occurred after World War III. You know, the world is a bit more desolate and there's a lot more crime going on in the city, and it follows this biker gang and their adventures through town, but then it becomes much more sort of sci-fi based as one of the characters gets involved in a government conspiracy and in fact ends up with telekinetic powers. Particularly if you've seen the Akira film, there's a whole kind of arc, it feels like, within the manga that's set in sort of like a wasteland version of Neo-Tokyo, and all of these different factions come out, and it feels very much like Mad Max. It's super cool, the artwork is phenomenal, and it's just a classic series that everyone should experience. Number 6 is another classic series, and it holds a really dear place in my collection, and that is Blade of the Immortal by Hiroaki Samura. This is a series that I feel like I've sung its praises since I read it initially. I did a whole comparison video on this versus Vagabond, which if again you want to go and check out, I'll leave a link somewhere in this video. The one disappointing thing about the release, I guess, is that it's printed left to right, which is a little bit disappointing, but there is a really long-winded reason for that, which I'm not going to get into now. The spines on these books are absolutely beautiful as well. They just look fabulous on my bookcase, and if you want to go and check out the series, they are reprinting it in this wonderful, really kind of maxed out deluxe edition as well. Of course, the reason that this series got a place in my top 10 is because from start to finish, I absolutely devoured this series. The choreography in this is by far the best that I've ever seen in manga, I would say. Of course, I'm all about samurai stories. I really love that kind of old school Edo period of Japan. I think it's really interesting. I really enjoy kind of learning a little bit more about how things would work back then. This kind of shogunate sort of era of Japan is just, you know, wonderful, and it's really well done in this story. The artwork is sketchy and a little bit different, but I love it for that reason. I think it kind of doesn't really fit in anywhere amongst other styles of artwork. Samura just has a way of making the characters really flow just perfectly within a battle situation, which is just fabulous to read. Lastly, the characters are all, you know, amongst some of my favorites. I really think that this series doesn't kind of do what you expect it to do. It's a revenge story through and through. It's about a young girl who hires a samurai who cannot die to help her seek revenge against the people that murdered her family. But what this story does is it actually will show you their perspective as well. You know, you follow some of the kind of main antagonist stories concurrently alongside the heroes of the story, if you like, and everything blends so perfectly together that it is just an absolute masterpiece. So please go and pick it up and you won't regret it. Now we're pulling out the big guns, and number 5 will be no surprise, I would think, because it's the crown jewel of my collection. It's one of my favourite things that I own, and it is, of course, Gantz. Gantz is a series that I've reviewed before on the channel, but I think it's one that definitely deserves all the praise that it gets. It's a super violent, super crazy sci-fi series about a group of various individuals that have all died in a variety of situations and have been given a second chance at life by getting involved in a really kind of messed up death game where they have to kill aliens wearing super suits and firing futuristic weapons. Unfortunately, Gantz is really difficult to pick up legally at the moment. There are omnibus versions from Dark Horse, but they're very hard to get hold of. I would say hold out for some sort of deluxe edition, which I'm pretty sure they're going to do at some point in the future. I said it before and I'll say it again, Hiroya Oku really has a gift for just creating bizarre events that just, they don't really make sense on their own, but when smashed together they still don't make sense, but you really enjoy it anyway. You know, this whole story has a lot of different things going on. There's aliens and there's vampires and there's kind of a huge invasion of like battleships and things falling out the sky and people's heads exploding, and it's just fantastic. It's just really crazy. It's just complete and utter nonsense, and I love it for all the hours of entertainment it's provided me. Quick plug as well, myself and Zach from OnTheShelf have a podcast called Between the Shelves, and we're introducing a new Manga of the Month segment where for that podcast you can vote on a different manga every month and we will read it together and then discuss it on the podcast. And for the first ever one, we're actually going to be discussing Inuyashiki. So this is another series by Hiroya Oku, so if you enjoyed Gantz or his other series Gigant, then please go and check out that podcast as and when it gets released. Now, number 4 was a tough one because I'd already decided previously what my top 3 were going to be, and I knew that I had to pick a series by Shuzo Oshimi to make the number 4 spot. But for me, all of Oshimi's works are so great that it was really difficult to narrow it down. I went for one that I think has the most complete story and perhaps the best ending out of all of them, and that is The Flowers of Evil. Now, I don't want to bore you by going into too much detail about Shuzo Oshimi. You know by now, I love him, I love everything he puts out, and this was tough because I think a lot of his other series that still aren't finished, or at least that I haven't finished, you know, I've still got Inside Mari to read, I've still got Blood on the Tracks to read, I think they all could potentially make this number 4 spot. But at the time of recording this video, I think The Flowers of Evil is probably his masterpiece work. It's a really important story and it's definitely not for everyone. He isn't everyone's cup of tea, and I understand that, but for me, I couldn't put this down. I remember picking it up, sort of tweeting about it, and within like a few hours I was halfway through it. It was just a complete binge for me, and it's a series that I will definitely always look back on fondly. So, top 3. You know, this is the moment where a lot of you will start wondering where certain series are. You know, hey, he hasn't mentioned that yet. You know, well, I probably won't, so sorry to disappoint. Let me know down below in the comments. For me, this was it's a tough decision to try and pick 3 manga that I think are my favourites, but I'll explain why. Number 3 will probably make none of your top 10 lists, but it's definitely one of my all-time favourites, and that is Cardcaptor Sakura by Clamp. Back in the day, when I was really into anime as a kid, I would watch Pokemon, Shaman King, Medabots I think was another one, Gundam Wing, Tenchi Muyo, but the one that I looked forward to the most on Nickelodeon was Cardcaptor Sakura. Now this was the old school dubbed version of it that had a lot of episodes cut out by Nickelodeon because they thought that they weren't safe for TV, but this to me is the prime example of why shoujo isn't just for girls. You know, in the past I've done a collection of videos that I called Not Just For Girls, where I talked about a variety of shoujo series and tried to get more male readers to check them out. And for me, Cardcaptor Sakura is probably the best one and the one that I urge all of you to go and read. It's a magical girls series, I guess, but it's got so much to offer, it's got so much action to it. It centers around a young girl named Sakura who opens up a book and outfly all of these cards, and inside the cards are actually magical spells, I guess. So each one kind of relates to a different thing. You know, they all hold these different magical entities and they get set loose across the world. And if she doesn't collect them all and recapture them inside the cards, then calamity will befall the earth, and everyone that she loves could potentially die. With the help of the guardian of the cards, Kiro, who takes the form of really cute little lion plushie, she goes on an adventure to capture each of the cards and return them to their previous states. She does this obviously by being gifted a magical staff to help her capture all these cards. You know, it's a really kind of cutesy setup, but each chapter follows a different card and a different sort of adventure and a different challenge that she has to face in order to capture that card. You know, the first half of it kind of follows that scenario, and then the second half has a little bit of a change up, and the tone of the series definitely changes a little bit. The best thing about this series is perhaps the art style. You know, I'm not a huge fan of really cutesy, big-eyed shoujo artwork, but the way in which the pages flow in this is just so wonderful to see. You know, there's huge kind of different styles of panels. You'll see cherry blossoms that'll kind of appear from one end of the page to the other, but it's done in a really clever way. You know, Clamp are just wonderful at doing that sort of composition. You can tell they really take the time to decide how they want the panels to line up and to make sure it all flows beautifully. And yeah, it's just really different. It's not like anything else in my top 10 list, and it's just a really beautiful series that has a fantastic ending, although there is a sequel I've yet to read, and it's something that I will always treasure for the nostalgia factor, but also just because to me it really is a shoujo masterpiece. So next up for my number 2 spot is another series that really affected me, but in a very different way. So that is actually Night Pom Pom by Inio Asano. So my friend Highland Manga actually got me this really nice Japanese copy of volume 1 of Night Pom Pom, which you can tell I've put it in a little kind of sealed bag, and I really treasure it. And it's a series that I remember starting and immediately putting to one side so that I could go and order all the other volumes so that I could binge it. The series that deals with depression, mental health, growing up and facing all of your issues as you do so, but it does it in such a unique way. Inio Asano portrays our main character as a tiny little bird, and he does this, I believe, so that you can kind of use him as a mirror almost. For that reason, you can make him whoever you want him to be. He can really just be anyone. That's the great thing about the series. He's not really a protagonist that appeals to any specific person. He really is there to represent anyone. Depression can happen to anyone, all of these horrible things can happen to anyone, and it's a really, really worthwhile story. Similar to, I would say, A Silent Voice, in that it deals with really difficult themes, Night Pom Pom does so in such an amazing way that it really is difficult to put down. It's such an engrossing read, but it's such a difficult read. It's something that I've only read once, and it's something that I also am unlikely to read again for quite a while, but it is a series that still affects me to this day. I still think about it often, I still think about all the characters quite a lot, and all the things that happen to them, although difficult to read, were really engaging, and I haven't really read a manga that's affected me in that way before. Okay, last but not least, my number 1 in my top 10 manga of all time has to go to Bleach. You know, you're gonna think that I'm really basic for picking this, but I don't care. You know, some people hate on others for how much they love Naruto, or how much they love Death Note, or Full Metal Alchemist, and there's a reason that people recommend those series for beginners. It's because they're some of the best series out there. And for me, Bleach was just the best of the big 3. I never got into One Piece. I was never a One Piece fan. And I'll explain to anyone who has the time why I don't like One Piece. And Naruto, of course, was one of the first series I ever started collecting. But it wasn't until I started reading Bleach that I really fell in love with manga. As I said at the beginning of this video, this list is my own. I'm not here to kind of please anyone. And it's just really for me to sort of document my tastes at this current moment in time, but I definitely think that there's nothing that's ever going to overtake Bleach as my favourite manga. I'll stand here and argue with you all day as to why I love all 74 volumes. I think the action in it is unparalleled in Shonen Jump, and although his artwork definitely changes in the later volumes, and some may argue that he's lazy, to me it never stopped being engaging. I think every single battle scene was just a complete page turner, and my only issue with Bleach is that I wish there was more of it. Of course, I'm really looking forward to the 1000 Year Blood War arc getting animated this year at some point, hopefully, and maybe we'll get some more traction and we'll get an English release of Tite Kubo's new work, Burn the Witch, in the West. Yeah, I don't really want to kind of go into too much detail about why I love Bleach. I think you either love it or you hate it. It's kind of like a Marmite situation, and I won't stand here and bore you to death about why I think it's great. If you don't really like it, then that's your opinion, and that's fine. I'm not here to change you in any way. I just think if you're new to manga, or you've heard of Bleach and you've never really given it a fair try, please do. It's so great. And I think even the old school fans of Bleach who sort of fell off the series later on will agree with me that the first few volumes, the first arc even, is some of the best that Shonen Jump has to offer. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it, and please don't be too disheartened if I didn't mention your favourite series. Sometimes I often wonder as well that my favourite manga series hasn't yet been released, as I said before, nothing's really going to kind of overtake Bleach for me, but there's always new manga coming out. There's always new manga being released, and I really like the idea of this video to document what I thought was the best manga at this moment in time and see if something new comes out that changes that. I also have a new video coming out very soon about my most anticipated manga releases for 2021, so I'll be really excited to kind of see if any of those releases overtake some of my top 10 spot and what the year has to offer. Thanks again so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and of course, stay awesome. Peace.